Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 110th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Sign up for a premium membership. Get all of my NHL and hockey writing sent straight directly to your inbox via newsletter. I also write for cover the Bruins for the Boston Sports Journal, so go to bostonsportsjournal.com and check that all out. Today with me, I have Mick Colageo, longtime friend and colleague, and the Boston Herald, Steve Conroy. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Sunday columns in bostonhockeynow.com, in season, home game, live blog, rink wrap, and then just a variety of things like this, thanks to Joe and his hospitality and my pal Pete Shepard on the radio in Florida, etc. And the hockey news, seasonal issues.
Talking hockey with friends. That's basically what it comes down to, right, Mick? We love to have you on, my friend. All right, let's thank our sponsors real quick.
That's what we're doing.
That's right. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time. This is the place to go to get your Major League Baseball tickets to go to the Red Sox this summer. Jarren Duran continues to be red hot right now, even though the Red Sox got smoked by the Colorado Rockies. He was hitting, and he's done some crazy things this year, so go check him out in person. In order to use Game Time, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. Our show today is going to be a little different.
Hey, Joe, before you get going, Joe, I have a quick question for you. Does Finn have the option of a meeting in person with the league? And could that be more than a 5-game suspension for that welt on your head?
that is not from Finn. Actually, we can use this as a public service announcement. This was actually a little basal cell carcinoma, a little skin cancer. This second time I've had to have a little bit taken off the skin. It's the skin cancer you do want to have. So basically, they just take it off and it's gone. Like, it's no risk of spreading. It doesn't.
Is the sound breaking up for anybody else besides me?
Basically, they burn a hole in your skin and remove it, and you'll end up with a few stitches. I was, though, on the ice with the kids last night. Couldn't wear a helmet because of where the stitches are. So I told all the kids I took a puck off the head during practice, because I didn't want to drag them into, dropping the C word on them when they're 10, 11 years old. But that is what the stitches are from. So everybody out there, please use sunscreen. They say that the damage when you get skin cancer when you're 50 like I am, it's actually from sun damage that took place 20, 25 years ago. So I'm sure it's one day when I went to Good Harbor Beach and had the top down on my Jeep and didn't wear sunscreen and got absolutely torched and sunburned to crap, that I'm paying the price now by sitting in a dermatologist chair and having skin burnt off my face. So kids, when you're in your 20s, when you're in your teens, adults, when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, if you're like me, light eyes, light skin, Irish, use sunscreen, use a hat, wear sunglasses, do all that stuff, because you'll end up paying a price a little bit later on in life if you don't, and I'm a perfect example of that. So use all that stuff. Thank you for bringing that up, actually, Mick, because I'm glad to tell everybody that and send that message along.
Our friend Joey McDonald went through something similar.
We're going to do a little bit of a different. Yeah, he did. Yep, he had it a few years before I did. My first one was on the side of my nose 2 years ago. And so this other one was obviously on the forehead, but I'm probably going to have to go in every few years to get something like this done just because of my light skin, Irish heritage, all that stuff. It sucks, but it's part of getting older. And not wearing sunscreen when I should have. And not wearing a hat when I should have, all that stuff. All right. So, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. It's a little more of a sort of a memorial, a remembrance. Wanted to really give our friend and colleague Mike Loftus his due. He sadly passed away. I think it was over the weekend. or towards the beginning of the week, after a battle with lung cancer. 65 years old. He had retired from the Bruins beat a couple of years ago, but covered the Bruins for, I think it was over 30 years, between 30 and 40 years. Definitely predated me as far as covering the Bruins. Was the Professional Hockey Writers Association Boston chapter chair for many years as well. Was a presence on the beat. Traveled earlier in his career, didn't later in his career, but I think it was, an example to everybody else of how you cover the beat for the Boston Bruins or for anybody else. Extremely great sense of humor, very welcoming to other people, always had advice if you had a question for him, and was a wealth of knowledge. And, I just wanted to take this episode, and obviously Mick and Steve are guys that knew Mike and were friends and colleagues with him like a long time, like I was, just to have some stories, some remembrance of him, and talk about him a little bit, because I think he deserves it. And I enjoy talking about him because he was such a good person and such a good writer for the Bruins, and just an all-around person that you look forward to seeing every day when you covered practice and covered games. So, Mick, if you want to start, just talk a little bit about Mike Loftus, and maybe, what you thought when you heard the news, and kind of, where you first met Mike, what your early remembrances of him are, and, just what you thought of him as a person and a writer.
Yeah. Mike was, I think, about 5 years older than me, but we kind of had a connection through music. We liked the same music, and we realized, years later, that we may have been at the same concerts together at the Orpheum and this and that, and we had great fun. And as everybody says, he had a great sense of humor, and it's hard to replicate it because it was so spontaneous. It was so Sauvignon Blanc dry. Yep. That it's hard to give an example of how funny he was, because it was always the ultimate you had to be there moment. But professionally, he when we stopped traveling about 4 or 5 years ago, it's a shock to the system. And I told this to Eric McHugh the other day, and you really don't know how to approach the job anymore, because you pride yourself on being everywhere with the team. So I had to model my the way I approached my job the way Mike did. It's a little bit different because Mike, worked for the afternoon paper, so he was always looking for an off the beat subject a little bit, or something a little more focused, like the second power play unit or whatever.
Yeah.
But, you just have to be there every day, when the team is there. And, he was so professional. Like Mick said, he developed good relationships with players without being pally with them. And, he was just a dream to work alongside and to be friends with.
Yeah. Mike was one of those guys, more than anybody else, that he would ask a question of the coach, and it was obviously like you're talking about, Steve, like an angle he was working on for a notebook lead or whatever he was doing, and you'd be like, shit, I didn't notice. I wish I had noticed that. Like you would, mm-hmm. you would learn stuff, or be like, damn, how did I miss that? Based on the questions that Mike asked consistently. This would happen a lot, where you'd be like, wow, he really noticed that. He's really studying what he's watching. He just has a knack for it too, where he just picks up on things really quickly like that. Changes in patterns, something that's a little different, like a trend, whatever. Like all those things with the Bruins, you would learn very quickly that he would ask questions that nobody else was sort of thinking, or going in a whole different direction than other people were thinking. And he was kind of watching on a different level a lot of times. Than everybody else. And I had the ultimate respect for him because of that. You would, and like oftentimes too, like other people would jump on and take something from him or share it with him, where I think he would get a little aggravated, because it'd be like, I did all the work, I came up with this, and now all of a sudden it's turned into everybody's notebook lead. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, it's true.
But he was like so good and so brilliant like that. He had a brilliant hockey mind. He really did. That I had the ultimate respect for doing that job. And I think it earned him tons of points with the coach, with the GM, with the players. Like, I think they all universally had respect for him. And you talk about him not being like buddy with the players. I think he did it a whole different way. he did it a way where like he would mention things to them that maybe they hadn't thought of or they hadn't noticed or whatever, or would show like just how much he was like paying attention to what was going on, and he would earn his respect that way from everybody. And I think he was universally respected by everyone based on the work he did, the things that he noticed, the questions he asked. And it all comes down to his mind and his love of hockey and him noticing all these small details. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time, the Red Sox, Fenway Park. Jarren Duran putting on a show at the MLB All-Star Game. So you may want to dig into your pocket and actually like spend some money on some Red Sox tickets based on Jarren Duran and the season he's having. This is one of those seasons where I think you're going to want to watch because he's in the middle of putting something together pretty special. You're going to say you were in the stands and you saw Jarren Duran like do something crazy when you were actually watching one of the games at Fenway. So go to Game Time. Last minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Zone deals, save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of getting Red Sox tickets at Fenway this summer with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create the account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I think it's because he coached the game, he officiated the game, and those things, those experiences of growing up in the game really kind of helped him develop as a journalist. Questions as though he were a coach sitting in the room who was there to watch the game and then come up with the questions. He and Matt Kalman and I used to sit next to each other over the Zamboni gate, and prior to the big shift of the media to the other end of the rink. And are we allowed language on this show? I mean,
go ahead, Mick.
Because
let it rip.
There's an F-bomb involved.
Sure.
There's an F-bomb involved.
Okay.
All right. So if Julian in the Claude Julien era, he might like make some little subtle change in his lines midway through the third period of a game, and invariably the player that got switched onto a line in the top six would score a big goal in that game. And Mike would slam his pen down onto the table in front of us and turn his head and go, "Fucking Claude." He just was really, it's because he knew all the time, he didn't miss a trick of what was going on lineup wise. And I think a lot of our younger core of media have gotten a lot better at this. We have more people that are noticing when somebody's not on the bench, how many forwards there are, this and that and the other thing. Mike was way ahead of his time when it comes to this stuff. And so any little subtle change that would be made during the game, that would be a well-timed coaching change, and he would hit it. It was pretty funny working next to him. I remember how upset he was when Chicago tied the game infamously, Game 6, 2013.
Yeah.
And how upset he was that the Bruins had Chara and Seidenberg out on the ice together for that shift. Why were they out there? He's screaming at me. So, I mean, I think there's a giant Bruins fan in just about everybody who follows the team in a professional context. And very rarely does it surface in public, but you get these little glimpses into the passion and the volcano that lies underneath, and he had one himself.
Yeah, no doubt. And Steve, that's actually from if you haven't checked it out yet, Eric McHugh from the Patriot Ledger did a really nice piece on Mike and his career and his legacy. And one of the quotes was from Steve here. He always had a question for a coach that was off the beaten path. Working for an afternoon paper, he always had to have something different for a story angle, and he always did. It was really amazing to watch him work, and he took such great pride in it. And I wholeheartedly agree with that observation. And it's like kind of an inside baseball thing, maybe, where we appreciate it because we do the job and understand how challenging it is every single day in, day out, to come up with something different like that in our angle or something, an off the beaten path approach to what everybody else does. But Mike consistently did it, and he earned the ultimate respect from everybody because of it. And, really when I think of Mike at the end of the day, Steve, I just think of like how highly respected he was by everybody across the beat, not only for that, but also the way he treated people from, top to bottom, everybody that covered the team as well. He treated everybody the same.
Yeah, and Mike would be great. There'd be somebody new who showed up in the press box, and maybe they were down the other end of the press box, and you didn't get to know them. But if I want to know who it was, I would ask Mike, and he would tell me that person's life story because he took the time to talk to them, and he was great that way, and very solicitous of young kids, and if they needed any help with anything, he was great. Just a really good-hearted person, with a a good caustic sense of humor, very stated, but caustic sense of humor that was probably honed in his years of the punk clubs. But just a wonderful guy.
Yeah, a tremendously dry sense of humor, and he was kind of a soft-spoken guy too. So you would have to listen closely to what he was saying to pick up on it too. And when you got to know him after a while, though, you would listen to when he was saying something because you knew some kind of funny nugget or something, something that was going to make you laugh or chuckle was going to come out of his mouth. And it was worth the straining to listening to what he was going to have to say or what he was going to say, what was cooking up inside of his brain. And funny story, I think my first year in the PHWA was 2005, 2006, somewhere in there, 2004. I can't remember when it was, but it was in the mid aughts. And I finally got a PHWA card. He was the chapter chair at the time. And I got the card. I looked down at it, and it said Dan Haggerty on it, who was, if people don't know, Dan Haggerty was the actor from Grizzly Adams.
Grizzly Adams, yes.
Which people of our generation will remember Grizzly Adams. The younger kids have no friggin' idea whatsoever who Grizzly Adams was, but I used to watch that and then Little House on the Prairie. I forget if it was Sunday nights, Saturday nights, whatever it was. But I always loved the fact that his last name was Haggerty, spelled the same name as mine was. But I never got the truth out of Mike, and I could never tell if he did that to be funny or if he did that genuinely as a mistake because he just thought of Dan Haggerty when he sent in my name. If somebody screwed it up at the PHWA, if it was a giant practical joke, I never quite knew for sure. But that was Mike. You weren't sure sometimes, how much seriousness, how much humor there was, where he was coming from with certain things, and I really liked that about him. But if you guys can think of any instances of his sense of humor or something he said or whatever that stuck in your mind that kind of crystallizes who he was as a person, I always think of that story when I think of Mike, and I think of how funny he was.
He was edgy about laziness. He had very low tolerance for lazy, and so when he saw it around him, he would not keep it to himself. It would be written all over his face. He didn't have a great poker face in that regard. There were a couple of other reporters who covered Bruins home games back in the day who would make it a post-game habit to follow Mike into the Bruins locker room, dressing room, sorry, Canadians, to take advantage of his questions and get those quotes into their articles.
Yeah.
And he knew that those two people were going to be stampeding him like a bull rush. And so one day, and he told me this, I wasn't witness to it, but he told me, he says, I got so tired of it that one day I decided when I was going into the locker room, and Mike was a fast walker. He
always took the stairs down from the ninth floor.
That's true. Yep.
He didn't trust the elevator.
Yeah,
he just it wasn't fast enough. The siren would go and turn my head and it'd be gone. So anyway, he would go. He went in there one night and he just decided to stop short, about 15 feet before he gets where he's going, and they ran him right over. It was like a multiple car rear ender, collision, and it was a dangerous thing to do considering the size of one of those two guys. But they, we had some reporters, veteran reporters from the mid and west in the state that just, they were like on the Loftus train every night. They wanted to make sure they got to him so they could get the quotes off of his questions. And that pissed him off. Not because he considered his questions It's not that he considered his questions proprietary information. It's not that. He understands it was a free-for-all. The problem is that they didn't do any of their own work. They were just leeching off of his. That's what got him. So Mike had a real kind of a sense of, we're here to work. That's what we do. And everybody should be doing it. And if you were, then he really liked you.
Absolutely. Steve, anything you think of when you think of Mike's sense of humor and, kind of like what he brought to the table on a consistent basis?
I don't know, this is a goofy thing, but I just remember when they started playing Private Eyes by Hall & Oates. I don't know when they played it during the game, but he would always do the clapping hand part. And it would always cause Heidi Holland, who ran the press box forever, to give him a look down like, pipe down there. And I don't know why that sticks in my head, but I always got a chuckle out of that.
And then when they started playing Hall & Oates, you'd be looking forward to the interplay there between Loftus and Heidi. You could set your watch to it. That's pretty awesome.
That's the thing. And then in more recent years, they started playing Stooges' song there, "I Want to Be Your Dog." And anytime that music would start before the face-off, he would get mad because why don't they ever play the whole song? They always do this to me, because he loves that. They love that. He loves the Stooges.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's definitely pet peeves with what the Bruins do for music, right? Like I have a pet peeve about when they play, during the playoffs now, when they have the Bruins banner that goes around and they start playing AC/DC. Yeah. But they immediately they've shortened it to like 20 seconds or whatever it is of AC/DC, and then they cut out and go to some like dance tune that's like total buzzkill from the AC/DC when the Bruins banner is being passed around the lower bowl, where they used to just let it play out the entire time. I don't know who made that executive decision, but they do that too. Like that. I think we all have our curmudgeonly like music takes on what they do at the Garden and the way they play the music sometimes. But I think that's definitely, that speaks to, with Loftus, he was a guy that not only was crazy about hockey and loved hockey, but he had other interests. He loved music. He loved, stand-up comedy. There's a lot of different things he was into. He was kind of a Renaissance man like that. And, it definitely got passed to his kids, Jamie and Ben. And Jamie, very successful stand-up comedian, and we'd hear a lot of stories from him about both of his kids. And and I mentioned something in Twitter when I tweeted something out about Mike's passing, that like he was endlessly proud of Jamie and Ben, and he would talk about them a lot and the kind of misadventures he would have with them. And you could just tell daily talking to him how much he loved his kids and how proud he was of them. And you can tell it in the outpouring of love from them, too, with his passing and some of the things that they've written and said. And I thought this was pretty funny. There were some funny stories in that article from Eric McHugh, like, Mike taking his daughter Jamie to a strip joint for an anthropology paper that she was writing that was 18 plus when she was in high school. That was pretty funny.
Can you imagine?
But I know. And his son Ben said, as a father, he never missed anything. For someone who was so dedicated to his work like he was, he never missed anything that my sister had going on or I had going on, even stuff that we told him he could miss. He wouldn't miss stuff like me being third chair tuba in high school. He had to be there. That's from Eric McHugh's story as well. And like, you could just tell, like talking to him and the way that he talked about his two kids, that how much he loved them, how proud he was of them, and just how they were his whole world, and I really looked forward. And now having kids too, like, and I know I talk about them a lot in that way too. I just had a lot of admiration for him as a dad, how much he cared about his kids and how proud he was of them. And, that was something I enjoyed as I got older and had my own kids, just seeing him as that kind of guy. And you always appreciate, I think, people that, that talk about their kids with that kind of pride and love.
Yeah, I always remember him, him coming in with a little tired in the morning because he had driven and picked up, Jamie from her overnight DJ shift for the Emerson station there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he obviously, and don't get me wrong, he complained about it, but he loved doing it.
Of course.
But he was, you could tell that was such a huge part of his life.
Yeah, I mean, Mick, it was
absolutely. In fact, he had opinions about. No, he had opinions about rock stars that she would get to interview through that gig, and sometimes they were rude. And he'd say, "Yeah, I really liked the music, but he was rude to Jamie when they had her on at the Emerson station, and I didn't care for that, So, but it's funny how he would be. He'd have such hard opinions about certain things, like our colleague Chris Hurley, his favorite band of all time is Cheap Trick. Well, Mike always was ready with the opinion that their first 2 albums were great. After that, they fell off. So that makes me, because my respect for Mike, it's been on my list of things to do to make sure I get the first 2 Cheap Trick albums. So I stopped just knowing them by the songs that made it into the YouTube sphere, or the radio before that.
Any memories on the beat with him that you guys can think of, as far as a place he liked to go, back in the old days when we had the morning skate and then the games, both at the Garden, or, just anything like that you can think of, times working alongside.
I got one.
Go ahead.
I got one. Remember the early days of the Fleet Center? I know this is making us all feel old to call the early days of the Fleet Center, but once in a while, and I did this too, you could readily park in there all day long before the game day charge would take effect. And after game day, if you went out for lunch, if we went for a skate at Stariti, Joey McDonald got us some ice there once, a few times, and I'd go there and take a nap, put the seat all the way back. Well, Mike told me he did this once and put his seat all the way back and was having a good snooze in the dark garage. And suddenly there were knocks on his door, waking him up out of a sound sleep. And it was security guards. Thought he was dead. He couldn't even catch a wink. He probably had to get Jamie that morning, so, but anyway, that's, that would happen to him.
Yeah. That's a pure Loftus story right there. Steve, anything you think of just memories with him, working alongside him for so long?
Let me think. I mean, he wouldn't get into crap fights with coaches usually, but he would ask questions that would force them to think sometimes when they didn't really want to.
Yeah. And
I remember Claude says, well, I don't even know what the question was. It was, the hindsight is 2020 there, Mike, And for like a month, I called Mike Mr. 2020, and he's like, ah.
But and this is true. I agree with you guys. I think you said it, Mick. Having coached hockey for the last 5 or 6 years with Finn playing, you do look at things completely differently, and you view the game in a totally different way, and you do come up with different kinds of questions, or there are different things you're watching and paying attention to, different things you're putting importance on, that all of a sudden you see it from a different perspective and you start asking different questions, and not just, because that's what fans want to know, not because that's going to get a reaction, not because of any other reason. Then you're just observing something in the game and you're like, why did they do that? I need an explanation of that, or why is this going on, or what, why wasn't this happening? But yeah, to your point, Steve, I still remember asking Claude why Brad Marchand wasn't on the top power play unit when he was the leading goal scorer on the team, and getting the red ass from him for that day and a good week or two afterwards, because I had the audacity to ask a question like that, which was pretty normal. But Loftus would ask those kind of questions all the time, and just from a knowledge perspective, or just from wanting to know, get the answer. He was always a guy that wanted an explanation for things that he was seeing on the ice.
and he always had, he always let everybody, ask the obvious questions, and
Yep.
it would be almost like at the end of the press conference where they go, anybody, anything else? It was like Columbo, I got one more here,
Right. I was just gonna say that's exactly like Columbo. One more question before I go. And hit him with the haymaker right before you leave the press conference. It's totally true, and you're right. He would let the press conferences breathe. He would let everybody ask the injury updates. Is a guy taking an option for the practice? Like all that obvious stuff would get out of the way first before he would dig in with a guy that scored one power play goal in the last 20 games and why is he still out there or whatever he would see on the ice and want to ask about. Just before we go, just real quickly, Mick, you first. Just what do you think Loftus's legacy as a beat writer, as a friend, as a colleague is? When you think about him now, you think the life that he lived, you think of how much time that we spent with him. What's you think his kind of legacy is now that he's past at 65 years old?
He never forgot that the professional athletes or the managers, coaches, that these are people. That never lost sight of that on the job. I can't say that the same. I feel like I'm better than I was 10 years ago. And at 10 years ago, I was better than I was 10 years before that. But I don't remember any time where Mike wasn't a great model for me in terms of showing me that and reminding me of that. And so that I would never get, especially in this social media age, where the low-hanging fruit is to denigrate people, to make a joke, look at me, follow my thing because I'm funny here. I shame somebody,
Yep.
That was never in Mike's playbook. It just wasn't part of his fabric. And if he had a feeling about something that was negative, he was so professional, he didn't let it bleed into his copy. And that, to me, has been something that I've taken as a teaching tool. So in that way, he mentored me.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that's the example he set for everybody. I would say the same thing, and I would say like I'm guilty of that sometimes too, of not being able to do that, especially when I was younger. Like as I've gotten older, I think my perspective has changed as I've gotten older and coached and had a kid that plays, and kind of realized that all of these guys were once 10-year-old kids that just were playing because they loved hockey and were the same exact as my son. I think my perspective has changed too on, not harping so much on mistakes that they made, not, trying to ask in a way that, isn't going to embarrass them or isn't going to like put them in a box, and isn't it asking in a way that like of curiosity of like, why did you do this here? Or, putting in a way that's not quite so adversarial or disrespectful. I think I've definitely learned that over the years and treat it a little bit differently and treat them more like, just people that are getting up every day like the rest of us and doing their job and realizing that everybody's in the same, position as far as that goes. Steve, anything you can think of, or what do you think Mike Loftus's legacy will be as a writer, as a person?
Yeah, as a writer, it's just the tireless professionalism and the patience to do the nitty gritty work of that it takes to be a beat guy. He is never in for as Mick said, for people to look at him. He was giving you information and he was telling you what he saw and analyzing it and doing it in a, I don't want to say self-effacing way, but just a way that didn't draw attention to him, but drew attention to the subject he was writing about. As a person, it's obviously his children, his family, and the pride that he had in them, and and it's obvious in the love that we've seen in the return, in these past few days, from Jamie and Ben.
I agree. And I got to say, like, Mike retired from the beat right around the end of COVID when things went back from Zoom to in person. That's basically when he retired from the Patriot Ledger, wasn't on the beat anymore. Wholly and completely missed his presence. And it took a few years. It took at least a year, maybe 2 years to adjust to him not being there anymore, and like his presence, the questions he would ask, the things you could count on him for or knew that he was going to do. Like, because a lot of times people don't realize this, but there is like sort of a biorhythm to all the different personalities and people that cover the team. And when you've been together for a while, there's sort of like a rhythm to the questions you're asked, the scrums, like the sort of working in tandem, everybody, even if we're also sort of adversarial in a way, or like going, to break stories or whatever. There's a certain rhythm to it. And I think Mike was a huge part of that for the, 20 years that I've covered the team, and certainly more than that for all the time that he covered the team. His dry humor, his brilliance, his hardworking diligence, his being detail oriented with watching the game, the welcoming hand and putting an arm around somebody's shoulder when they were new to the beat and coming on, the knowledge that he would bring, the levity on a day-to-day basis too, with the dry humor and the caustic wit that he had. All that stuff was missed when he retired, and it's certainly obviously going to be missed in a much different way now that he's passed away at 65 years old. But thank you, Mick. Thank you, Steve, for joining me today to talk about Mike Loftus. I think this was a great episode, and it was a really nice tribute to him, and I'm glad we were able to do it. I also want to thank our sponsors real quick. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We're also going to thank Game Time. Game Time is the app that you can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Mick, Steve, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You got it. Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you at the rink.